Lovely. Good morning, everybody. How are you this morning? Welcome to the second Sunday of December, where I'm asking the question, what does it take to get enlightened these days? That's supposed to be funnier than that. But it kind of is a question. It kind of is a question that we live with a little bit as spiritual practitioners, spiritual seekers, spiritual livers. That if there's a vision ahead of us to open to live here and now in an awareness of the divine, not only everywhere, but also in everyone and in us, that there's some kind of waking up that needs to happen or some kind of transition that needs to happen. Does that seem true to you? Yeah. That there's some magical something that needs to happen. So we're looking at today the second Sunday of Advent, which is the preparation for Christmas. And the Advent wreath here is in a circle, and it's also made of evergreens. So it represents infinity and the infinite love of God. And then each Sunday, a candle is lit that represents a particular quality that Advent itself means arriving or to arrive, to show up, but it also means to ripen and to invade. So the advent of something that is an awareness is an invasion as well as a ripening and an arrival. And so we're looking at these things as part of the mystery of the season as we light these candles. And so far the candles are purple. Next week we'll have a different color. But so far the candles are purple. So we're going to light the first two candles as we sing the Advent song that Reverend Carol and Bodie wrote a while back, which is also recognizing the solstice time of year. So the first candle, which we lit last week, is a candle of hope.
We light a candle in the dark to greet the newborn sun. The earth turns upon its axis, a new year is begun. A new year is begun. Two candles in the dark to greet the newborn sun. Blossoms reaching to the light. Winter's hold is done. Winter's hold is done.
So the first candle represents hope, the opening to the possibility of something more. The second candle represents peace. And peace is, it turns out, an essential quality of what enlightenment brings forward in the individual. So when we understand, and it's not just understanding, it's really anchored in us cellularly an awareness of oneness that is unshakable. When we know that, know it, not know it, but know it in ourselves and in other people, we dissolve the illusion of separation. So there's only one. And we're called to then share this peace with each other and with everybody that we encounter. So I'm going to invite you to repeat this after me because I didn't do a slide for it. Today I rest in peace, knowing there is no competition in God, and there is no separation. Nothing and no one can harm my own true nature. Can harm my own true nature. Because nothing and no one is different or separate from me. as I feel and welcome this truth, I am enfolded in peace. So we look at now what it takes to embrace or allow peace, which is, it can be a challenge for us to do that, particularly in the Christmas season when it seems to be such a busy, intense time of year. And it can be quite fraught in a number of ways, but the holiday season is meant to be a time of generosity and forgiveness and good humor. And sometimes the juxtaposition between that and going shopping can really drive us up the wall. We're trying to be extra good, but we're feeling extra stressed. So in that spirit, I offer this little story. 3 men died on Christmas Eve and were met by St. Peter at the pearly gates. And St. Peter said to them, in honor of this holy season, you must each possess and show something that symbolizes Christmas to get into heaven today. And so the first man fumbled through his pockets and he pulled out a lighter. And he flicked it on and he said, this represents a candle. And St. Peter nodded kindly and said, welcome to heaven, you may pass through the pearly gates. And then the second man reached into his pocket and he pulled out his keys. And getting the hang of it, he shook them like this and he said, these are bells. And St. Peter smiled and said, great, you too may pass through the pearly gates. And the third man was just baffled, and he's searching desperately through his pockets for something, and in his jacket pocket, suddenly he pulls out a pair of his wife's panties. And St. Peter looks at him dubiously and says, and what do these symbolize? And the man looks, racking his brain, and then he happily declares, these are carols. And St. Peter laughed out loud and ushered him through the gates. And so the Christmas season began. So you might imagine going from stress to playfulness is part of the story of entering into this season from a place of openness and peace and enlightenment and availability. So the question then becomes, well, who is enlightened? Who has been enlightened? Who was enlightened? And I'll name just a few of them for you. There's Jesus. There's the Buddha. This is supposedly an actual drawing of Buddha that somebody did when he was 41. That's not our traditional image of what Buddha looked like. Sri Aurobindo, who was a lot like Mahatma Gandhi, he was an activist in India, a political activist and rabble-rouser, basically, kind of like the leader of Fenn, that's not how you pronounce it, but in Ireland, the radical wing of the IRA, Sinn Féin. Is that it? Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin. Good. So he was kind of like that, but he began to practice yoga, and in his practice of yoga, he began to go deeper and deeper into the spiritual qualities of it. And then eventually he spent like 4 years doing yoga practices just devotionally, deeply. And then people began being attracted to come to him to seek his counsel spiritually, and he began to write and to share. And his writings, like some others that we've shared in here, remind me of Ernest Holmes. And in fact, Sri Aurobindo was someone that Ernest Holmes was influenced by in the reading of his work. And then we have 2 modern day mystics, Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie. So Ernest Holmes says this about Jesus. Jesus is the man, Christ is the idea. The universal sonship is the word he uses, or maybe offspringship, I might say, of God, manifested through the person of Jesus, causing him to become the Christ, just as it caused Siddhartha Gautama to become the Buddha, the enlightened one. In other words, the idea of sonship is set before us as the living embodiment of the God principle. And then in another writing of his, Holmes says, now the word Jesus is a name, like John. Christ has the same meaning as the Buddha or the Atman or the Anointed or the Avatar or the Messiah or the Enlightened. It means the spiritual principle and the divine presence. So when we're looking at these folks and saying, well, you know, what does it mean to be enlightened? What is that about? It seems that it is that the human being comes to an awareness of an identity that is deeper than their human temporal identity. And not only do they recognize it in themselves, but they recognize it everywhere. And they don't seem to leave that awareness. It's something that stays with them once they deeply enter into it. So I think for me and for most of us, there are times when we have flashes of that, a moment or a meditation or an experience somewhere that lifts us up out of our everydayness and allows us to feel and experience something greater than we are. It could be a concert, it could be standing on a mountaintop, it could be hiking or doing a sport or running. It doesn't matter what the vehicle is of the moment. What matters is that we touch that awareness, even for a moment. And so I ask myself sometimes, well, how did they get that way? What woke them up? What happened with them? What made them who they were? And what I see is that Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie both entered into an experience of complete surrender. They were both so miserable in their lives as who they were and what they were experiencing that they didn't feel they deserved to live. They were ready to be done. And in that place, for some reason, something happened and they let go. It was a complete surrender of their life and who they thought they were and everything that they might be or hope for or imagine. They let it go and something happened. Now that's not to say we don't all let go of stuff in a way that feels like that to us, but somehow there was something with them. And then for Siddhartha and Jesus, there was a passionate yearning for the divine and entering into a search. Buddha was a rich man's son who was predicted either to become a great political leader or a spiritual avatar. And his father did everything possible to make sure he would become a great political leader. He protected him from seeing anything negative in the kingdom, old age, sickness, death, illness. He didn't let him see any of those things. He was raising him to be a mighty political leader. And then one day he kind of got out of the palace, and as the universe would have it, he saw all those things. And it changed him forever. And he spent then decades searching for enlightenment, searching for any way he could find to find it. He'd already experienced excess, so he went completely to the other end of things and practically starved himself to death, lived without bathing, prayed constantly. He tried everything. Yes, nose-blowing emphasis, thank you. And somehow, then finally, when he entered into that long meditation, he had prepared himself in a way that allowed him to wake up. And we see sometimes it happens as a sudden awareness. Brother Lawrence was a man who was not too bright, according to his own evaluation of himself, but he was very devoted to God. And one day, in the wintertime, he went outside and he saw a naked tree. And he realized that within that naked tree, in the spring, it was going to be filled with leaves and flowers and blossoms and be beautiful and full of life. And there was something about that awareness in that moment that woke him up. He never went back into a separateness again. And I'm going to tell a story about somebody else in just a little while. And then we had practice and devotion. That could be Jesus too, but it definitely is Sri Aurobindo, who entered into a deep practice of meditation and yoga and isolated himself and went into the silence and spent a long period of time in that practice. And that practice and devotion changed him and changed his character over time. So I guess the answer to the question of how did they get that way is that there is no one way, which I find really annoying. That there isn't a prescribed perfect path. You could say, you do these things, and within 30 years, you're going to wake up. You know, it seems like a long time, but it's something. But in this case, what we see is that the path is individual to that waking up. And Byron Katie, in her wonderful letting go-ness and sense of humor, says, who cares if you're enlightened forever? Can you just get it in this moment right now? And really, this moment is the only moment. And so, Rumi says, what you seek is seeking you. Set your life on fire. Seek those who fan your flames. You wander from room to room hunting for the diamond necklace that is already around your neck. And so we find ourselves searching for something that was never lost. That awakening, you know, we might ask ourselves, well, why do I really need that? Well, life is working fine for me right now. You know, I'm reasonably happy with my work and my relationships and my health and my income. I'm doing okay. You know, it's a lot better than it used to be. It's good. Why should I put, you know, attention or effort or concern or anything into enlightenment? And maybe it isn't worry or effort or concern we need to put into it, but the awareness that we need it and the world needs it. And the world is yearning for it, and part of it comes through every one of us. And so we ask, what are we here for? And also, what is it that really brings us fulfillment? Because the deep fulfillment that lasts, it's not about our stuff. And it really, although it appears to be, and can be to some degree, it's not really about our relationships or our health or our money or our work. Those things contribute to it, but they don't solidify it or make it real or put it into place. They just enhance it, because every one of those things could disappear, or they could all disappear, and we could still find ourselves singing a little tune. We could still find ourselves in fulfillment and peace, even though the appearance does not lend itself to that interpretation. Are you with me here? Yeah? And so there is a secret. I don't know if you can read this or not, but this says, enlightenment is the recognition of who and what we are. It can be experienced anytime and anywhere. There is no special place we need to go to experience enlightenment. And this is the secret key. It's already there. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. It has more to do with coming into a place of wakeful observation, of present moment presence, where we're actually paying attention and being there in that place. I'm looking for something here. So, in order to welcome peace in ourselves, we have to choose to see ourselves differently. We have to recognize that, like the song Merrill sang, we are the ones the ancient songs, God bless you, we are the ones the ancient songs were about, because we're here now. We have been called here for such a time as this. The universe and the world has need of us here, and we came because we were called. And we're in this place where we learn and practice and go deeper into a philosophy that talks about this experience of unity and unitary understanding and not putting anybody outside the circle. And boy, that's a big job, isn't it? To do that, to come into that awareness. Peace, like light, attracts. It attracts to itself more light, and it transforms what's around it into greater peace, because it isn't transformed by chaos, but the chaos is transformed by the peace. And so Ernest Holmes says, oh, there it is. Ernest Holmes says this: the kingdom of heaven, which seems to me to be enlightenment, the kingdom of heaven is that place within ourselves where there is universal and individual peace at all times. Peace that holds no doubt of our abiding good and wise divine protection. To enter, we must simply recognize that this is the kingdom, that it exists, and it is exactly where Jesus taught us to seek it, within ourselves. The Pharisees, it says in the book of Luke that the Pharisees asked Jesus, well, when will the kingdom of God come? And he said, well, it's not going to come by observation. You know, it's not going to come by looking under every leaf and twig for it. It's not going to because somebody says, oh, there it is, or here it is. No, it's in your midst. It's within you. It's hidden in the place you're going to look last. He didn't say that. I added that on. And so Jesus taught us to seek it within, that that's where the kingdom of heaven lives, and it doesn't have to do with what's going on around us as much as it has to do with the atmosphere in which we're welcoming that peace. When the separation is dissolved, what happens? If we let go of our sense of separation from other people, we're not afraid of them anymore, no matter what we think they're going to do or what they do. We're not afraid of anything that could happen to us or any situation we could be in, because we're aware of it as a temporary illusion of sorts that is going to dissolve, and we're going to find ourselves. Somebody gave the example, it's like if Tim and John are characters in Susan's dream, and Tim is awake to this fact. He knows that he is a character in Susan's dream, that she's dreaming him, and that when her dream is over, this version of his experience will be over. But John is not aware of that. So John is plunged into all of the experiences of the dream, but Tim gets to walk through them with a sense of peacefulness because he knows it's just a dream that he's a part of. And life is a bit like that. In this temporary walk that we're doing right now, it seems very real, just like a lot of our dreams seem very real while we're in them. But this is a temporary passage. It's very temporary in eternity. And we're just walking through it, collecting experience and information and wisdom that then becomes contributed to all that is, including to whatever the next expression of us is. So this fellow is talking about his miraculous awakening. His name is George Wallace. And he says, on September 11th, 2001, my life was changed forever. Not in the way you might imagine on such a fateful day, a day when so many people experienced an unimaginable level of terror, outrage, fear, and helplessness. On this day, my heart was touched by the hand of God, and I experienced such a profound and sudden awakening, such a total and pervasive feeling of love and peace, that to adequately describe it using the innate limitations of mere words would be beyond the abilities of any human being. Moments after the second plane hit the World Trade Center in New York City, I found myself driving my car with my jaw on my chest and my eyes wide open, seeing and not seeing, intellectually captivated, and emotionally consumed by the spiritual transformation that was taking place in my heart and soul. You see, I was driving into Boston to see my dentist when my wife called me on my cell phone to tell me what had happened. And my instantaneous reaction was to tell her that we were at war with somebody. And I wanted that war to happen right away. I wanted to immediately project the awesome power of the American military on whoever perpetrated such a heinous assault on innocent people. Then, a very peculiar thing happened. When my head went to my heart, and this all happened in a split second, to find a similar sentiment and an internal ally, thereby creating a fully integrated feeling of outrage, violence, and revenge, it was not there. It did not exist. I was shocked. The I that lived in my heart and soul at that moment was peace, love, serenity, light, and joy. I was transfixed. I was home. In the next instant, that feeling spread into my head, and I did experience the fully integrated feeling I wanted, but not the one I expected. I was overcome by the complete and total understanding that to answer violence with violence would only create more violence. Having studied military history as a hobby for so many years, I finally knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the only real success achieved by any war in the history of mankind was to sow the seeds of the next war. And I instantaneously believed that the attack on the World Trade Center was the greatest opportunity for world peace to come down the pike in a very long time. All of this occurred in the blink of an eye, and I never saw it coming. I felt as though I was totally lit up on the inside. I felt an energy that was electrifying and absolutely peaceful at the same time. And it felt like time itself had come to an abrupt and immediate halt. As I continued to drive, I found myself in complete awe. I knew it was real. I was totally aware of what was happening to me, and I was stunned. The only thing I could say was, "Oh my God, oh my God." I know how crazy this must sound to you. It still sounds crazy to me, but I lived it, and I cannot deny that fact. I did not ask for it. I did not seek to have my life changed in such a profound and complete manner, and I never expected that something like this would or could ever happen to me. Things like this happen to other people. I also knew that my life would never be the same again. I thought that I had things fairly under control. Now I understand that all I had was the illusion of control. Although I have procrastinated for quite some time, and in many ways I come to this part of my life kicking and screaming, I can finally understand and accept that I had the experience for a reason. I believe it is my mission in life to share what I learned to be true, whenever and wherever the opportunity should arise. It took me 2 years to begin writing a book about what happened on that day, as well as the events that preceded it in my life. But a book is not enough, and the voice inside me will not quiet down until I do something more and keep doing it. Truth be told, I don't know if it will ever quiet down. And that is now, finally, okay with me. I like the voice. It is the voice of God. It is not my goal to preach, it is not my goal to judge, and it is not my goal to convert anybody to anything. It is also my goal to teach the understanding that we can achieve world peace one person at a time, one day at a time, and one thought at a time. I have lived the benefits of a life of peace, and I need to share them with you. According to A Course in Miracles, the best way to learn something is to teach it. The Course also says, teach only love, for that is what you are. The pathway to enlightenment is peace. Namaste.